You're listening to a CNA podcast.
We've had our eyes glued to the news over the past couple of weeks, watching the developments in the Middle East. Tensions between Israel, the United States, and Iran. It has potentially deep ramifications for Asia's energy supplies. Today, we find out if the turmoil might extend all the way to our power bills. Hello and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board. Hello as always to Liling Tan. Busy times. How are you?
Hi Jack, I'm well, thank you. Yes, always busy in the newsroom, but especially the past few weeks. Why are you laughing?
Of course, the newsroom just never stops, does it?
It doesn't, but with all that's happening in the Middle East, that kind of sucked up a lot of the oxygen. We see once again how conflict and uncertainty in one part of the world can have consequences elsewhere. Oil and gas prices, of course, seeing volatility, but it also raises a question about our continued dependency on fossil fuels, which we'll be talking about in this episode.
For sure, we shall be doing that. But first, it's quiz time. A couple of questions, I think, to inform the discussion that we're going to have today. And I think the questions are not so difficult for you, being someone, schooled up on energy systems. First, which country in the world is the biggest importer of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, by tonnage? And which country is the most reliant in the world on LNG to generate electricity?
Is it the same country? Is this a two-parter?
You tell me.
Is this a two-part question?
You tell me. Is it one country or is it two?
The world's biggest importer and biggest consumer of LNG is China.
Yes, correct. The answer is China. Well done. In 2023, China imported approximately 71 million tons of LNG, making it the number one importer globally, and that's about a quarter of the world's imports.
Yikes, that's a lot.
And so are you saying that China is also the most reliant in the world on LNG to generate electricity? Are you going for a 2-for-1 here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with China.
Oh, Leong.
No.
You've thrown away all your good work. It's Singapore. Singapore is...
How could Singapore be the largest consumer of LNG? Are we, in terms of volume? Oh, most reliant. 95.
95% of its electricity is generated from natural gas. Most of that is coming via LNG. Other countries in this region are also pretty high on that list. Thailand's right up there. It's about 67%. So there you go.
Yeah, that's quite a chunk of LNG. All right.
Now it's time for our main story this week. The conflict in the Middle East has left the world on tenterhooks, and it has energy markets on edge too. Gas fields have been targeted during Israel's strikes, and Iran has flexed its muscle over the control of the Hormuz Strait, a checkpoint for about 20% of global oil and LNG shipments. Now, oil prices are volatile, and that threat triggered an 11% jump in Asian spot LNG prices. It made coal cheaper than LNG for Asian markets. LNG prices and freight costs were already elevated, and it's left Asia vulnerable to ripple effects. More turbulence is expected as long as tensions remain. If there are more disruptions, prices could rise again for major buyers, including most of the countries in this region.
And Singapore is one of those countries, as we touched on earlier in the quiz. Around 95% of Singapore's electricity is generated using natural gas. Now, in the past, the country had to import natural gas via pipelines from Malaysia and Indonesia, and that's changed since the SLNG terminal began commercial operations in May 2013 on Jurong Island. Now, Singapore can import liquefied natural gas or LNG from anywhere in the world, supplying about half of the country's total demand for power generation. And for those of you wondering what's the difference between LNG and natural gas, well, it's basically natural gas cooled into liquid form for easier transportation and storage. So who better to discuss LNG than Leong CEO of Singapore LNG Corporation, or SLNG. Wei Hung, thank you for coming on the pod. You're in the hot seat today about all things LNG.
Thanks for having me, and I'm really privileged to have this time to be sharing my thoughts with the audience.
So Wei Hung, there's been a lot of talk about tensions in the Middle East. I'm sure you've been watching this very closely. How concerning has it been, and how do you think it could affect the gas that Singapore relies upon?
I think the events in the Middle East is certainly a source of concern. But the events in the Middle East and those in Ukraine earlier has taught us many, many lessons, right? Importantly, they have also driven us to look at how we can buffer ourselves against unexpected disruptions in the market and how we can work with our regional partners to help each other out. Events like this really impact everyone in the region, even as we expect the supply of natural gas to increase in the coming years. The supply chain, the logistics aspects of the business is a growing concern, and this is really due to unexpected global events, right? But we are watching this very closely. Fortunately, it hasn't resulted in any major disruptions, but we are monitoring it, and we are also constantly engaging our customers to get a sense of where the potential trigger points may be.
Wei Hung, how prepared is Singapore if something happens to slow down gas supplies or greatly increases the prices coming from overseas sources?
Singapore's energy supply is very resilient today with our existing infrastructure. We have got our standby LNG facility to draw on, but also we have a diversified LNG source. LNG comes from all over the world, some going through the Gulf area and many don't. So that's actually very, very comforting. But the volatility of the events can create uncertainty, and obviously it can lead to many aspects of costs in our daily lives as well. So that's also a hard one to address. The vulnerability is not in how much we can get, but how we get it. So the logistics and the supply chain remains a weak point. Ships have to be at one place at one time, and any disruptions in one location impacts everything that happens after that. That problem will continue to persist for as long as there are hotspots around the world which are beyond the control of everyone. Obviously, we do have piped natural gas as well. So that forms part of the energy security framework, and we can draw on that with our neighbors for as long as our neighbors agree to send us a bit more when we need that gas. As far as price spikes are concerned, there's very little that we can control. The only thing that I guess the government can do is perhaps consider price hedging going forward. The government recently announced the creation of GasCo. That will be the sort of the government LNG procurement arm, right? And when that organization is properly set up in a couple of months, I'm sure they will have the capability to also manage price fluctuations as well. I don't know the details, so I can't say more than that.
When we met previously, Wei Hung, and then I got to visit the SLNG terminal on Jurong Island, we had talked about LNG being a transitional fuel between fossil fuels and cleaner power sources. Are we really talking about a transition in terms of an eventual phase out of LNG, or is LNG always going to be a part of the energy mix?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The energy sector will continue to need to find ways to decarbonize. And the ultimate goal for energy users is to transit into zero carbon fuels like ammonia or nuclear. Other sources of power can also come in a form of things like hydroelectric, solar power, wind power, for example. Or they can try to abate the emissions through facilities like carbon capture and storage, or CCS for short. But however, these options are still very nascent and expensive to deploy compared to existing energy sources. And they also have their own individual challenges. So in order to enable energy reliability and to keep costs affordable, LNG and bioenergy remains the most feasible solution, especially when you couple it with ongoing efforts to use drop-in components like biomethane and bio-LNG. Right? This reduces the carbon intensity of LNG usage further. The energy transition is inevitable, and SLNG is not one to stand still and wait for things to happen. We need to remain relevant. We need to do this by getting involved in debates, in conversations, and also in very selected cases, get involved in the development of these options. For example, we are involved with the development of the CCS capabilities for Singapore. We are also developing the capability to store and to distribute cleaner ammonia, power generation, and for ship bunkering. And also, we are also enabling our terminal to be certified to handle bio-LNG. These projects will take time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of engagement with stakeholders, but they are necessary for our country and really for the world at large.
So, do you think that Southeast Asia will become a stronger LNG importer over the midterm? I think all the projections suggest that it will be. And then to kind of play devil's advocate with you, wouldn't reducing exposure to these volatile energy markets actually be a smart economic play? And that would be through increasing renewables instead of more gas investments.
Your question is in two parts. One is what the region's position is and what the future reliance looks like. And also then on the second bit is, wouldn't renewables be better, right? So I'll tackle these two quite separately. One, for sure, you see Asia in the world stage as the fastest growing region for LNG. And it represents more than 30% growth through to 2035. So that's very strong growth, right? If you then take out China and India, you will continue to see ASEAN's growth through this period as very, very stable and quite a straight line. We see a lot of interest, as you mentioned, in countries developing LNG receiving facilities similar to those at SLNG. You see that in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And really, if you look at the reasons why, diversification of sources is one, but more importantly, the region's natural gas reserves is depleting. Although we do find new wells and new sources, it's harder to get at and it's so further apart. So you see more and more countries developing LNG receiving facilities. The efforts that ASEAN, the nations, are progressing in the likes of the inter-regional gas network, right? And also in parallel, the cross-boundary power grids. These are very important developments to further the regional collaboration towards ASEAN's energy resilience, right, and security, because it really helps that we help each other. Some have advantaged positions on gas and some have advantaged positions on electricity, and therefore to have that interconnected collaboration will be a very important aspect for ASEAN going forward. Now, to your second question of whether wouldn't renewables be even better given the disruptions? Natural sources obviously does an advantage that we have full control of how we generate power from the sun, from hydro and from wind energy. But these forms of renewables also have their issues, and the issues include things like intermittency. The sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, right? And we have droughts and we have floods, and therefore hydro has its limitations, right? And to back that up, you do need to have battery storage in order to capture any excess that nature affords us. And that in itself creates other problems around how do you source for the materials to build those battery arrays? How do you dispose of the batteries after they run out of life? So they do have their own problems. And to have them as baseload will be a challenge. Right, so that's the short answer to that difficult question. What nations are looking at and what Singapore government is looking at is a combination of all these things, so that there is a effort to go towards decarbonizing the energy sector, energy sources, but also to provide people with constant and reliable energy at the same time.
So, Wei Hong, just to be clear, you're saying that the demand for LNG, which is more stable, is going to stick around in the short to medium term, and you're not going to be out of a job?
In my view, I think we are very secure. For as long as I'm alive, I think LNG is still going to be required. at least, yeah. And if you look deeply into what people expect reliable, uninterrupted energy supply. As long as you have figured out how you have ample supply of LNG, how do you get the LNG to where it's needed, that provides you with a base load, right? And that base load will guarantee you that you do have a constant source of energy. I mean, it doesn't matter whether the sun is shining, whether the sea levels are rising, or whether the wind blows, right? Yeah, as long as you have LNG, you have power.
Do you feel the pressure on your operations, on your company, about your position in the industry to show that, for all the benefits and necessities that you've laid out for LNG, that you are still part of the climate solution as the world looks to move away from fossil fuels, even if it's gradual, that you're not part of the problem?
That's a great question. I encourage the listeners to look at our ESG report. And in there, we are very clear that we want to be part of the solution, both in terms of how we operate our business, but also how we help others operate their business, right? So we are very clear that we draw electricity to run our pumps and compressors, and therefore there is a carbon footprint. We do need to flare sometimes for emergencies and sometimes when we need to help our customers gas up or cool down their vessels. And we do it very quickly, very short. We also have got equipment that helps to recover LNG that comes as a result of our activities so that nothing is lost. There are more sensors at the terminal that you can never imagine. Yeah? And these sensors measure everything that potentially can leak. Right? And they are so sensitive that they'll trigger us even that if the smallest amount comes through any flange or any connections. Right? And we take action to stop those emissions. So we don't want to be a cause of the problem. Right? The world talks about methane slips. Right? The upstream sector obviously is very concerned because they do have a larger operation than a terminal like ours. But equally, we are very sensitive to methane slip and we monitor it very, very closely. And it is part of our effort to minimize the emissions, like I mentioned. And in the activity to help others decarbonize, one of the things we are doing domestically is we are expanding our road truck facilities so that we can help smaller businesses in Singapore transit from diesel and fuel oil into LNG. And that in itself reduces the carbon footprint and carbon intensity of the operation. And I mentioned also the work that we are doing towards bio-LNG. So that work decarbonizes LNG even more. So the carbon intensity decreases even more. So to our users in power generation, ships owners who are using it for bunkers, that carbon intensity also get reduced. So we want to help others to decarbonize as well.
Now, when all the news broke about Israel strikes on Iran and then US strikes on Iran, what was the impact on the ground for you? What did you guys have to do? What were your biggest concerns? Can you give me a sense of what kind of impact that has on an operation like yours?
When the news broke, our immediate thought was there going to be an impact on the Gulf of Hormuz? That's where the major logistics is. The world is not short of LNG. The world is vulnerable to the supply chain. Yeah, so that's what we were watching. So unfortunately, nothing happened. But that does not mean that the next few days and weeks will be the same. So we are prepared.
I think that's the key question that the average person listening to this would want to know. And when they see the news, conflict has erupted or tensions are emerging in the Middle East, energy markets are going up and down, the price of oil is peaking or it's dropping. What does it mean for my electricity bill?
Yeah.
And if LNG supplies are impacted, will I have to start paying more or will the lights turn out? Can you kind of talk us through how all of these things are connected or actually not that connected over the short term?
Yeah, so the right party to answer your difficult question is EMA, but I'll just give you a very broad answer to that question, right? So the price of electricity that you pay doesn't just depend on the price of LNG. So it depends on infrastructure costs, cost of distribution, and also tax and everything else, right? So indeed, the price of LNG is a element in that cost structure, and it would have a significant impact because you can imagine not only does the absolute price of the fuel come into play, but that price of fuel impacts all other operations downstream, right? So the cost of labor, the cost of distribution, the cost of piping, everything goes up. So cumulatively, it may have some impact on the electrical tariff. But I mentioned we do have alternate sources. We have piped natural gas coming from our neighbors. We've got liquefied sources. And also we've got the standby LNG facility where we can draw on as well. So there will be some pricing effect and the government will do their best to dampen the pain, but there's only so much the government can absorb. This effect of life, we see inflation as a result of any kind of supply chain disruptions.
This makes the case for a faster transition to alternative clean energy. True or false?
My personal view, false. If you think about it, right? not just because I'm a LNG guy, right? For now, but I'm a realist. Yeah. What is the true alternative, as in fast, alternative? Solar, wind, hydro. You will discount that because of all the challenges for renewables, like I mentioned to the other question. Is it ammonia? Is it methanol? Ammonia is 4 times the price of LNG, right? And methanol is 4 to 5 times the price of LNG. Is it nuclear? Are we ready emotionally to handle nuclear? We will be, and the government is obviously making that study to determine where and when we should deploy SMR technology in Singapore. It's a realistic option for the future, but it's not tomorrow, right? You wouldn't get the price of methanol or the price of ammonia down to the level of LNG or for diesel at the same level of diesel by tomorrow. You can't, right? So you will take time. Your guess is as good as mine as to what the time means, but it won't be tomorrow. Yeah. So LNG still remains to be the lowest carbon, most affordable LNG source for the time being.
Okay, great.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wei Hang.
That's all for this week. We'll be right back here next Thursday. Thanks for listening.
Same time, same place. See you next time. Liling Tan signing off.
I'm Jack Board. Thanks to the team that produced this episode: Saye Win, Tiffany Ang, Janani Jahari, and Pei Ning Ho.